Are you seeing people, Pranjal?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I can't see them from me.
I can see all of them. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is Pranjal from Scaled Agile. Hope you are all doing well and safe. You all have been muted. We have a packed agenda for today, and we will give another couple of minutes before we start. I see quite a few of us have joined already. Thirty more seconds before we start. I see people still joining in. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I am Pranjal from Scaled Agile. Thank you so much for taking time out today to participate in this remote PI planning webinar. I am joined by Gerald Cadden from Scaled Agile and two other SAFE fellows, Scott Frost and Thorsten Jennings. Gerald will introduce them in a bit. The agenda for today, if you can move to the next slide, please, Gerald. So a couple of housekeeping items. You all have been muted, as you would already know, but we definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. So the chats have been logged as well. So the only way to funnel in your questions is through the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. I hope most of you are familiar with Zoom now. So there's a Q&A section at the bottom. So feel free to send in your questions as and when you think that you have a question. There will be presentation from the SAFE fellows, 15 minutes each. We'll go through the available resources quickly, and this is going to be an interactive panel Q&A discussion. All right. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Gerald, and I'll unmute you in a second. All right.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Gerald Cadden. I'm an advisor with SAI and instructor. Tonight we have we have a couple of our SAFE fellows who have agreed to come along and talk about a lot of the issues we have with this very current situation where not only are we doing remote planning, but now we're doing really remote planning. So we're all probably used to having some teams in remote locations and managing the tooling and the logistics of that. But the challenge we have now is that we now have everybody remote. And so the stress on our communication systems, the stress on our tools, and the stress on the individuals of being organized, especially if they haven't worked from home before, is pretty substantial. So both Scott Frost from Solutions IQ and Dr. Thorsten Jennings from Kegon have both agreed to come and share some of their wisdom and some of their tips, some of their practical advice on how to get us going. So with that, I'm going to go to Scott first. Scott, if you want to bring up your presentation, and you may start.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Scott Frost. Hopefully you can see my screen. Gerald, all look good?
Yes.
It does.
All right. Well, thanks again, and appreciate everyone this evening coming on and letting us talk about this. It's been a bit crazy for several weeks now for most of us. And as Gerald said, we're doing, really 100% remote everything. And that's been a huge shift. We're used to always having a mix of co-located and distributed teams. And now even the co-located teams that have really become high-performing teams are having struggle and being virtualized. And there's a lot of things going on. So we really, oops, don't know what that is. Random acts of TV. Sorry about that. Anyway, so there are several examples that we've done in the past few weeks. So I thought I would come on and share a few of those. First is, one was about a 15 team, co-located team with a single art. I've got another one that was a smaller art. So you would think would be a little bit easier, but we actually struggled more on that one. And then on the 24 team one, we had 2 arts, both doing things in the parallel time boxes, trying to collaborate across multiple days, do pre and post between the 2 arts. So it was a large solution train. And there were a lot of really good tools and things that we learned along the way, but it wasn't easy. And there was a lot of time taken. In fact, I would say in our experiences, expect at least 20–25% extra amount of time and effort it's going to take to run a well-engineered 100% virtualized PI planning. So just be kind of prepared for that. In these teams and these arts that we recently did, there was a mix of, mature teams, less mature teams, very first PI planning. How would you like that as your experience? The very first one being completely virtual. We used a mix of tools. Zoom seems to be now the most popular one that we've been doing. The biggest thing we found is Zoom can do breakout rooms very well. Microsoft Teams and a couple of our organizations are the only tools they can allow, and Teams does now have some amount limited breakout rooms, so that's been very helpful. The breakout rooms are really important so that you don't have a mix of, trying to keep track of a dozen different WebEx events. And what we've learned is that the more links and the more people have to move around between different environments and different virtual space to collaborate, the more complex it was and the harder it was to sort of keep everyone together or to get everyone back together at various times during PI planning. So we had some really good experiences, and 2 things that have come out of these experiences that we really have now sort of instantiated for all of our PI planning events is a couple of things. One, a cheat sheet. So there's a very clear list of, here's all the breakouts, here's the schedule, here's a master sheet of all the links, getting prepared to do that. And the second thing is really spreading things out to be at least 3 days. In some cases, we've tried like 4 half days to be a little bit shorter so that we're not forcing people to be online for too many hours all at once. Because there's a lot of time where they need to split off and have their breakouts with their teams and come back. And so what we found is spreading it out a little bit more, staggering it across time, seemed to make it a little bit easier. So that's been very helpful. And then, like I said, we've really sort of got into 3 or 4 main tools, it seems like. The one that's not on here that I certainly would recommend as well is the piplanning.io. Now that seems to be a really good app, but I've seen people use that. Mural seems to be really good because it's a nice big sort of acres and acres of white space, whiteboard space for virtualizing. We also use Weave. So the tools are good. They don't take the place of collaboration. So the tools are never going to be as good as your teams are in collaborating. So it's kind of a test for your teams to be able to manage through all of that. The other thing we've done during PI planning that we found really, really helpful is not only do Scrum Master syncs, but do stakeholder syncs and do PO syncs, PO/PM syncs. So during what you might normally do in a virtual or in a regular PI planning event where you come together for Scrum of Scrums, we've been also doing that with some of the other key roles. So if we have stakeholders meeting regularly, say with system team, or shared services meeting regular with stakeholders, and having some regular time boxes for everyone to get together, that seems to be helpful, and giving everyone kind of a chance to sync during these long periods of breakouts when normally you'd walk around and just have conversations. All right, the other thing that everyone seems to really like is visualizing all the teams in a big room. So here's an example of where we had a bunch of different teams, and all the teams, we kind of built this in Mural, and we laid out links, and so each one of the team names here, which I've kind of genericized, but you could click on the team name, get a bunch of data about the team. You could see their links in ADO, you could see the breakout rooms, dependencies, all those kinds of things. We're all kind of in this big map. So this map became a way to kind of navigate in a visual way, just like we might in a big conference room if you've got a couple of dozen teams trying to figure out who's where. So that was a lot easier. The first time we didn't have anything like this. By the second PI event that we were running, this one kind of evolved, and it became a really good way of sort of visualizing how we put it all together. So I'd highly recommend that, or something like that. Then I put together kind of these last two slides of sort of tips and tricks that we learned. So certainly willing to share them, but you know, we all know that PI planning, video and audio is critical. You know, whether you're doing it in a big room, you know, it's even more critical. And on how many hours we've spent dealing with people's various technology issues when they're all spread out and everyone's at home. Sometimes it's within the person's control. Other times it's been not. It's been local issues with networks and stress on the networks, things like that. So you really have to plan much farther ahead. Make sure that you're testing everything out and spending more time kind of making sure all that's working properly, because we've struggled a bit with that. You've got to have much more elaboration of the backlogs. That's another key factor. Obviously, Scrum Masters are going to be much more, I think, required to lead and make sure that the time boxes are kept. It's really hard to, as an RTE, to keep your Scrum Masters moving and flowing when everything is virtual. So you got to rely on them a lot. And then, like I said, you do a lot more virtualization of the boards, of the program boards. You've got to come up with a way to be able to see that. We've had some teams that have been doing it in ADO, and you know, or in Jira and other tools, and that's helpful, but it's still a little less visual. So I think still trying to come up with some of that. We've had more success doing it in tools like Mural. But you want to make sure that all that stuff, all the good things you know about PI planning, that you're sort of achieving all of those the best you can. Another thing that's not on here that I meant to put on here is what we're really learning is a new role. The more virtualizing we're doing, whether it's training or PI planning, there's these new roles that are, we're calling it the producer. So if you have a big event, not only do you need an RTE helping to facilitate a bunch of stuff, but you also need some sort of audio visual producer, someone who knows the tools inside and out, who can help be a pair of hands on the side, sitting in the chat windows, making sure that devices are working, that audio is working. If anybody has any technical issues, someone to help lay out the murals or whatever tools that you're using. So we found that that's really important, to kind of have this role as a producer. So, you know, as you collaborate more and do more virtual PI planning, you know, I would say that you really got to spend a lot more time preparing and a lot more time doing retrospectives to try to figure out what's worked, what did people like. You know, some of us are realizing this is going to be maybe short term for some, but longer term for others. So as we're just going through this and trying to learn as much as we can, the more you can feed back, both to your own organizations and to the community at large around what you have that's working, what's not working, that helps everybody. So share as much as you can. be as open as you can, and then, you know, let your stakeholders know not only the things that you've accomplished with PI planning, but things that you're still struggling with and you need help from. So I think that's it, Gerald. So.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So it's very good. So if you, I think maybe we'll just leave the questions to the end, Pranjal. We'll do the Q&A after we go through Thorsten's presentation.
That's right.
So Thorsten, if you want to tee up yours and move ahead. We are answering some questions in the chat window. In the Q&A, we've had some good questions. Scott, you mentioned a tool and it was Mural, M-U-R-A-L, right?
Yeah, it's a tool called Mural, M-U-R-A-L.
Okay.
And I think it seems to be a really good collaboration tool. It's like a giant unlimited whiteboard.
Yep.
And you can get a free account at first, and that's how we played around with it before we bought licenses.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know that, you know, most of these tools eventually are going to come with licensing costs. So you do have to speak to administrators internally in your company and really determine, you know, what you can do. Especially a little tough right now. People are watching their budgets.
Yeah, and of course, security. So if you've got these kinds of typical cloud-based tools that are not authorized, you either can't use them or you need to start talking to security organizations early to try to let them know the problem that you're trying to solve and what tools can you use inside the space that you have.
Okay, cool, thanks. Thorsten, do you want to bring up a presentation and away you go?
Yes, I'm looking forward to. Thank you. What I am talking about is our experiences about several PI plannings we were forced to do in a dispersed way in the last weeks because of the situation we are in. And the beginning of the situation was not that we didn't have any experience with remote PI plannings or distributed PI plannings, but we had done several things in a similar way as Scott was talking about, where teams were divided through continents and where we had teams spread it across continents, India and Europe and US, for example. And therefore, we were quite comfortable in using the tools we are talking about here, but it was a new quality where we are working in these weeks. Why is it a new quality? If you read about distributed teams and dispersed teams from Johanna Rothman, then you see that the dispersed teams means that you not only have several locations where some team members are co-located, but as in the situation now, every team member is dispersed across the world and everyone is another location. So you don't have common physical white wall or something like that. You have to work fully distributed. And the theoretical basics we had worked about in the last years were the books about distributed teams. And of course, the book of dispersed teams in a virtual team setup from Lisette Sutherland, which is a really good literature to come into the topic and to learn about the practices and the how to work successfully in such a setting. And she really has years of experience with such settings. And what I'm talking about is a mixture of settings where we have done now 3 fully dispersed PI plannings in the last 4 weeks. We had from 60 to about 100 knowledge workers in the PI planning, so not too large, but large enough to get the experience. I think now we are ready to do PI planning with a large solution train with about 300 to 400 knowledge workers in the next 2 weeks with the experience we have made during the last weeks. But I want to talk about the experience of the last weeks. The first thing I want to talk about is the roadmap for the preparation to the PI planning. Of course, we all know that each PI planning has to be prepared very well. But if we want to do it in a dispersed setting, we have some additional things we have to be clear about. The first thing is, when we are talking about such a situation, you know, in every PI planning, we are asking, do you have a roster with the team members and the art roles, and do you have a complete overview? This, of course, has to be done here in the same way, but it has to be clear that you really are in a dispersed setting. If you have a situation that there are 20 or 30 people working in one room, then you have to organize it in another way, or you have to force them to go in an artificially dispersed setting to be in the same situation as the other team members are. But of course, nowadays everyone is dispersed. You need an organization team. You have to ask, whom do we need to get that organized? And Scott talked about that topic too, and you need some additional roles. I will explain. You have the same education and preparation for all the team members, and you have a quite similar agenda, and you can do it in the similar way, but you need much time for the dry runs. Everyone who has taken part in a distributed setting where you have locations in India, in China, in the US, or in Europe, you know that you need the dry runs to become comfortable with the technology, to see whether the lines are working, and so on. Here you need dry runs with the team members themselves. Everyone should be in the team room in the week before, in the days before the PI planning, and to get comfortable to use the tools. Nowadays, it's quite normal that some of the team members aren't used to work with tools like Mural, so they have to become comfortable before the PI planning. They have to learn about the tools before it, and then the PI planning, the PI planning event can come. And of course, afterwards, we need a learning of the doing again. When we are talking about the infrastructure, then I have 5 critical points what we as the infrastructure. The first and most important thing, of course, is the video conference tool. We worked with Zoom too very successfully because it has the best feature set nowadays, but we, because of the discussions about the security, I've seen we had a question about the security topics about Zoom in the Q&A too. We did the same with the Starleaf or the Microsoft Teams, and it works, but what you have to organize is that you need several team rooms to be able to discuss in several rooms. So Zoom is able to make breakout sessions dynamically. Within Starleaf, for example, we were forced to organize 5 or 6 parallel sessions to organize the team rooms, and then you have to make everyone get the knowledge which team room is for which purpose, where to meet to discuss which item. And this is a great logistic you have to organize, of course, and you have to think about before. Then you need additional chats, 1 chat for each team, of course, 1 chat for the PO team, 1, and I think the most important one is the back-end chat for the RT and the Scrum Masters to talk about the progress of the PI planning and where to support the teams, where the bottleneck of the planning might be. And of course, you need a facilitator chat where you can discuss, is the infrastructure working? Does anything not work as we planned it? And there are those Slack channels very important as a backbone for communication for the infrastructure team. Of course, you need a virtual whiteboard. We mostly are working with a Mural board, and I think it's the best at the moment. and you need a session Kanban. We were used to do session Kanbans in physical PI plannings too, to get an overview where you are, where is the bottleneck of the planning, which feature isn't going forward in the planning to be discussed in the evening of the first day, for example. And this session Kanban is much more important in this virtual setting because everyone has the overview where the planning progress is. You need a feedback tool to get a discussion about feedbacks on the content, on the features. You can do the value estimation, the business value estimation on the second day with such a tool. You can do the session retro with such a tool, and it works very good. And of course, you need the feature documentation and tracking tool like Jira or any other tool which we were used to work with in our traditional settings too. I will give you some impressions from the work too. One is that you need the facilitating infrastructure. You need stewards for the communication. You need a steward for the session Kanban. You need a steward for the program board, for the risk board, and the backlog. This seems to be very much personal infrastructure, but if you are working in a large setting, it's very valuable to have one person everyone can contact if there is any questions about setting some dependency on the program board, or setting a discussion on the risk board to be discussed on the second day, or if there are discussions about the prioritization of the backlog, of course, too, you have to have a steward. That might not be necessary to get 5 persons to be the steward, but you need the roles with at least 2 persons taking the stewardship of those things. In the beginning of the planning session, you need a welcome or warm up. Here you see two settings. One is where we had a regional PI planning, where we posted a map of Germany to our Mural whiteboard, and everyone could post his personal avatar where he's just working to get comfortable with the tool, and you see who is working where and what is the role. The second example is on the right side of the slide, where we had the roles. We have some PMs and we have a facilitator team. We have the RTEs, and so you have the same thing. You have the choice, or you can combine some things. But it's great to take the time in the beginning of the session where you physically come together. This is a time for about 15 minutes to come together, where everyone is working on the Mural board and setting his avatar where he is. We also were able to do the inspect and adapt before the PI planning in such a setting. So here's an example of our problem-solving workshop, which had been facilitated on the Mural board too. And it was a really great work, because it was a little bit more easy than in a physical setting to combine the cross-functional discussion teams of the inspect and problem-solving workshop with this flexible Zoom possibility of to organize breakout sessions. Here is an impression of a Mural virtual planning room. You see all the signs here. This is one person, each name, where you see who is working on which item now. You see your program board. You see a timetable. You see the working areas of the teams, and in a similar way, you can organize everything. Here in the top of the room, you see the feature list to be worked on. Those are the items you can organize on your virtual PI planning room walls. Here you see another example. What was very successful was that here you see the part of our program board, and we introduced a line that a dependency had to be discussed with the responsible team. So we organized an entrance area. We want to discuss something, and then you can do the cross-fitting discussion across the teams to be able to define the dependencies afterwards, as you see it here in the wall. You see a Scrum check-in radars with the answers, which was working very good. You see an example of a PI planning Kanban board where the features are put from the feature backlog to the planning working, and then those who were ready for the review in the first evening were in the third column. Here we had only in the working area of the teams the PI objectives, because in this setting we decided to document all the feature attributes in the Jira and not on the Mural board, and you can decide it in each way how you want to do it. And of course we decided here to take a photograph of our roaming sheet of a physical session to discuss the roaming risks on the second day. The results of this PI planning retro were very good. We did a retro, and it was a German, so I beg your pardon that it is in German here, but what it means is the first question was, how did you like the technical situation, the work with Mural, and this is quite normal. Everyone likes the working with the Mural whiteboard. The communication was very good. It was 3.5. The virtual team breakout were quite good. And would you recommend such a PI planning, a virtual PI planning? And it was quite good. And you have to know those are German votings, not American votings, which normally are quite better. And the confidence vote was quite normal for a German setting too. And so we said the success of the PI planning is at least as good as in a physical meeting too. It's not worse than in a physical meeting. Our summary, our retrospective, and this last slide. Good preparation is a key success factor for any virtual PI planning. Of course, you have to test all the infrastructure. You have to get comfortable not only as facilitator team, but you have to make everyone comfortable with the working environment. And you can play games in the days before or something like that, but make them comfortable with the physical, with the virtual boards. You must invest in infrastructure and facilitators. You have to define several rooms, and you have to think about who takes the role of facilitating which item to get not confused with the virtual work of hundreds of people. Virtual teams at Agile Release Team need more discipline in the work, but this more disciplines really help to get more success in the PI planning event. If sometimes you have situations in physical PI planning where you say, oh, it was a little bit chaotic, you don't have a chance to work in a chaotic way in this virtual setting. Try to organize dry runs for everyone, I said, and like virtual PI planning, you can also run a virtual inspect and adapt workshop. We did a virtual value stream workshop last week too, and it was really great. And so I think every large room event is working in such an environment too. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Thorsten. Couple of things before we move on to the next stuff. Thorsten, just while I have you, someone did ask a question on your view on Mural or is Miro better tool? Have you used either of those tools?
Yes, I personally have worked only with Miro. Colleagues did some work with Microsoft Teams too, I think Miro is quite good because it is a virtual endless whiteboard, and you can scale up details or zoom in details, and you can do any corporational work. But that's not really necessary for PI planning because you only have to work with about 15 to 20 items, frames to work on, and you don't need any more. So this is working with any tool set, I think, where you have a virtual whiteboard. It might be in another session too, but Miro is the best tool I know.
Okay, great. So one thing I'd like to do for everybody while we're on, it just so happens that SAI is about to do their own PI planning, and we're doing it all remotely. So I thought what I might do, given some of the questions I saw, I might just thought I'd show you how we're organizing for our remote PI planning. So we'll be doing remote PI planning across about 150 or so people, and we are spread out across America, Latin America, Europe, and of course, Asia Pacific, where I am. I'm in Singapore. So let me bring up something. Let me just present my screen and show you guys just a way we're getting into this presentation, and it'll just give you some ideas of what it takes to do this. So right now you can probably see my internet side up. So Pranjal, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me just go to our intranet. So the way Scaled Agile is actually going to do this is we set up on our intranet page a tool to access this. So we set up an intranet page, and we're setting up for doing PI planning on this. So if I go to our PI planning site, you'll see immediately that it comes up. Well, not immediately. Apparently, my internet's a bit slow. The kids are probably playing on their games, so killing my Wi-Fi. So as you see, when this begins to come up, we internally are using Weave to demonstrate this. And so as this comes up, what you can see is this is what our room, our virtual room looks like. And each of the tables is set aside for our teams. If I go over here to join PI planning, and you will see that it pops up the Google meeting. So when everybody enters PI planning, they will immediately go to the Google meeting where they can hear the business context, the product definitions. We can hear from, architecture and other things. So we have all our centralized presentations done there. Teams would move over to their breakout. So here's my team. This is APAC. And so we would simply go to our Google meeting where we can collaborate, but we also have a Weave board. So the boards, if I scroll down, you'll see there's a bunch of boards that are going to be available to us via Weave. And so we would actually go into each of our own boards and begin our planning during our breakout. We'd be adding stories. I don't want to take up too much time here, but let me see if Weave goes in really quick. There's nothing there yet, of course, because we haven't started PI planning. But you can see this is the board. So as we go in here, we'd be able to add stories, maintenance stories, infrastructure stories, explorers and enablers. So we'd be using Weave, and anybody can go and look at our board in real time. So that's kind of the work we have in here. Let me go back to the intranet page. Notice here too, we also set up boards for the program board. So as people again will go into Weave and they would see a board that looks similar to this one, and they can plan their dependencies. Also, we have the PI objectives. If we go into PI objectives, that brings up a spreadsheet for us, a Google sheet, and people can go into the Google sheet and they can begin to see, all the different teams here. So if I go over to the APAC team, which is somewhere along here, if I go to my team, here's a place where we will start entering our PI objectives. And again, it's all accessible to anybody in the room. They can click on these links and go and look at them. So for example, if I have a dependency and I need to go talk to another team, I simply go over to that team. Say I want to go to multimedia, I go to Flash, I go to their Google Meet, and I ask for someone to talk to. And then we talk, and maybe they put a story on their board, we put something on our board. So we're using Weave internally, but having this kind of a diagram and using links becomes really important. What's critical for us, the same things that Scott and Thorsten mentioned, is preparation. You know, I'm Scrum Mastering for my team right now, and it's been a whole week of going back and forward with the RTE and other Scrum Masters and my team, organizing how we're going to do this, because this is the first time we've had to do this. SAI normally plans all in person, you know, with occasional person being remote. So I hope maybe just a little bit of visualization there helps. What I'd like to do now is move back to a Q&A session and open this up, and we'll start going through the Q&A questions, and we can go. So what I'll do is I'll read down the questions and maybe hand them off to Scott or Thorsten and answer them myself. Does that work for you guys?
Before we go in there, do you want to do a bit of the resources?
Good. Yeah, sorry. Let me go back to presenting and bring that up for you.
All right, thanks. So while Gerald brings that up, let's play a little quick game. And you will see on your screen, there will be a poll which will come up, and you would have to just select one of the options. So I'm going to launch the poll in a second. Watch on your screen. The poll is now launched. The question is, have you accessed the Adapting the Safe Way page on scaledagile.com and the remote training delivery aids on the community portal? Yes, no, or that's Spanish to me.
They may not know what that is yet. So do you want to just quickly shoot through the resources so they know what all that is?
And that's the intent. When I know the result.
I see, okay.
So I see that almost all the people are answering the question, which is great. What is also great to see is that there are more no's than yes. All right, we'll give you 5 more seconds over here. Key in your response. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. So I see almost all of us have answered this question. And around 60% of us have neither accessed the page nor are aware of the remote training and delivery aids on the community portal, which is a good segue into the next section, which is the resources. So there is this URL which I shared on the poll window as well. This is a page that you will see. Just Google, if you don't know the URL, just Google COVID and Scaled Agile. Just Google that and you will find that as a top result. And this is the page where you will find access to, or rather a consolidated view of all the resources that you need to learn, watch, listen, read. All the resources are over here, including the FAQs. Most of the people have been getting the responses and questions on, hey, you know, can an SPC train a public class, or what are the things that I need to be aware of while I'm teaching a private class, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be your one-stop shop, so to speak, where you can find access to all the resources, and then it will point you into different directions. And if you go to the next page, Gerald, you would also see the view from the community portal, and I see that almost 40% of you have accessed this page. So the team over the last few weeks had put together the remote training and remote delivery aids, which will help us facilitate the remote training, like leading safe, Scrum Master, POPM, etc. And also the remote events as well, like Inspect and Adapt and PI Planning. So please go ahead and log into your community portal and ensure that you are aware of these training policies, materials, guidelines, and you start exploring all these remote training aids and delivery aids as well. And there is a section of FAQs as well over there on the community portal. And then the next slide, please, Gerald. Right, and on the community portal as well, you will find some of the quick tip videos as well. In fact, there was a webinar which was done by Tamara Nation, who runs the product courseware platform at Scale Agile. This was done way back in March 11. And I think this is an excellent start for most of us to just listen into this. And she explains how to use these resources and what are these resources and the intent behind them. So all these are available. And I think that COVID-19 Adapting the Safe Way page on scaleagile.com would be your one-stop shop where you can point yourself into different directions. Over to you, Jared.
Great, thanks, Pranjal. So I think the next thing we do is just start the panel Q&A. We've got about maybe 15 or so questions here to go through. So maybe we'll just fire this question off and I'm not sure which one of the panelists actually has this question. So this one's from Shiraj. So it's, what is the need for a steward when we have a Scrum Master in each POD? Scott, okay, Thorsten, that's yours. Go ahead.
Yes, I talked about the stewards, and we need the Scrum Masters for the discussion in the teams, and the stewards are the facilitators for some artifacts of our PI planning event itself. So the steward has to be at the board, the board steward, to see who needs which feature dependency has to be discussed to get a finalized state on the board. Of course, you are right. If you have a good managed Scrum Master team, you can put the roles of the stewards to the Scrum Masters as a second role. And so if they are comfortable with them, you don't need additional persons. But I would suggest to define the role of the steward, and that one Scrum Master, for example, takes the role.
Okay, thanks, Thorsten. So the next question is also for you, Thorsten. I think you've already answered this one because it was your view on Mural versus Miro. So which is the better tool? And I believe you said that Mural was one you've had the most experience with, yes. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're okay there.
I think the part that I liked over there, Thorsten, was, and I saw in one of your snapshots that you were able to draw the dependencies on the program board. Is that correct, that you can do that on Miro?
Yes, you can do. You can define lines between items, and they are walking with the items over the board.
Wow.
Cool. That's great. Pranjal, do you want to read this one out?
Sure. So there's a question, any ideas implemented for virtual social fun events at the end of the planning day? How has your experience been, Scott or Thorsten?
Yes, we didn't think about that in the first setting, and it was a pity. And it's the same for the trainings, for example. If we have social events in the evening of our first training day, for example, or so, what we did was we defined some sessions with the Zoom meeting where we had breakout sessions. Without any plan, and we said we will meet in the evening, and then you found yourself in a breakout session with some participants of the PI planning you didn't work with, for example, and so we did such an event, and we said them, oh, you can take a beer with you and talk a little bit, not only about the PI planning, but you have to organize small discussion rooms for that.
Okay. What about you, Scott?
Yeah.
Did you guys do something?
We did. We've done several things. We've tried to do, since everyone seems to be at home, we've tried to tap into that personal side of connection. And one of the things we've done is these virtual happy hours where you take a break, and it didn't necessarily have to be at the end of the day, but you take a break. And if you've got family members working at home, in my case, I've got 3 kids at home and they're all online doing school. My wife's also working. And when we had this virtual happy hour, we took an opportunity to get everybody's family together, bring your pets or whatever, and just share personally and say, hey, here's my family, and introduce and have a conversation and see, you know, who it's like. Oh, wow, your kids like rugby too. And then, so then we kind of had this a little more personal social time that's unlike what we normally would do in a work setting. And that just seemed to be one of the things that people really liked.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, we've had a lot of remote meetings at Scaled Agile too, and you know, I've been getting to meet people and their families on some of these meetings. It actually does add a real more personal touch to your workspace, which I actually quite like. So,
Do you know what's the theme of our PI planning now? This one, Gerald?
Say it again, Pranjal.
Do you know? And just so that all of you know that there is a theme of PI planning that we usually have for all our PI plannings at Scaled Agile. So, Gerald, do you know what is the theme of our PI planning?
Yeah, so we normally theme our PI plannings, but again, we create very elaborate themes because we're often in person. And for this PI planning, they were supposed to do a Western theme where we'd come as cowboys and have a real Western thing. But unfortunately, that's just too difficult to do remotely. So they've chosen to do a funny hat and wig. So it's actually a funny hat and hair. So people have to have a hat and some odd looking hair. So when people are sitting there staring at them, it can create some amusing scenes. So I think you have to have fun with PI planning, and as much as possible, find a way to make it amusing. Unfortunately, most of this stuff, you know, visual things work really well in this world. I want to move on to the next question. This is from Julie. Is Weave available for remote PI planning solution publicly? I don't believe it is at the moment. We are building templates and playing with how we would adapt this for PI planning. Weave is available as a tool, which you can buy licenses for. Not exactly sure how, so you probably have to reach out to Scaled Agile on that. But you can buy licenses for tools and set up templates, but I don't think we have the templates for remote PI planning available at this point.
So Jude, you can reach out to me. We can have that conversation later on. But for this point of time, just think about this, that this is going to be available as a membership benefit when you are a member of Scaled Agile and certified. Over the next few days, you would see that it is now going to go as a part of your membership benefit on the community portal.
Okay, cool. So this question from Siraj: visualization is certainly a key aspect. However, what are the other things that we need to focus on? So Thorsten, let's toss this one to you. So obviously being able to see things, big virtual images, you know, visualizing things. Are there other things that you think are critical besides just the visualization?
Yes, I think the main thing of the success of big room events overall is that you are able to design the communication during the session. And of course, if we talk about preparation, you have to be very well prepared about the communication design during the session. Which session do you need where many participants take part? Which groups do you have to build during the breakout sessions? Are you flexible enough to define new groups which want to discuss things you didn't think that could come, and to have some facilities to be able to organize that? So communication design is the second main thing in my point of view.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah, I would second that for sure. And then I would add time, you know, keeping track of time. It's just so easy when there's so many other potential distractions, when everyone is in their own little space in their home or whatever they're doing. And so time boxes are really important, as we all know, but I think we've seen that people don't necessarily come back from break like you thought they would, and they're harder to corral than they are in a physical space. So just helping to remind people of schedules and to lay things out time-wise makes sense.
Okay, so I'll add one thing to that. I think the other thing to concentrate on is your connectivity for bandwidth. I mean, people are geographically distributed all over the place, and you really don't know what kind of bandwidth people are going to have in their homes or what they've got available to them. Just today, I was talking to one of our colleagues from China as we were having a meeting. In the morning, she had great bandwidth. She was able to do, to present some materials. But when we came back a couple of hours later, all of a sudden her bandwidth just disappeared. And it was really hard to hear her. She faded in and out. The presentation was out of sync. So really make sure that people understand what connectivity is available to them and have a backup if they can. Okay.
Yes. Or another thing is you can define rules that everyone can communicate non-verbal, like something like this, or I need a break, or something like that, that everyone is able to communicate in this way with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Nothing speaks better than a picture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This one's from anonymous question. So this is recommendations on keeping dedicated synchronization time across arts. Across art collaboration time with PMs, architects. So again, this is how do I keep a lot of things synchronized? Scott, do you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, we just had one with 8 different time zones, and so it's always hard, right? There's no secret sauce there. I think what I mentioned earlier around time boxes and having very crisp, clear times, and that everyone understands, I would say has empathy for the other time zones that's not you, right? Yeah. So many times we get used to, well, this company happens to be in this country, and so they tend to lead, we always operate on their time zones. Well, here, especially when everyone's so remote and so spread out, we really have to have a better sense of empathy around that. So coordination, time boxes, clear schedules, and empathy.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the more time and pre-planning is really important to know ahead of time, plan it into the agenda when those synchronizations are going to take place. Okay. And Thorsten, let's throw this question.
Don't underestimate the channels, the Slack channels, for example, to discuss that the PMs are able to discuss with each other on such channels.
Yeah, like a little setting up some of the side channels where teams can communicate across. We internally use Slack, so on the day
yes,
we'll be using Slack. We all have our groups, and so on the side, if I can't get into the Google Meet, I can Slack people, or I can go to their teams.
And in this way, you have a multi-dimensional communication line. Yeah.
Yep, that's true. Next question is there any platform, is there any platform in place? Sorry, is there any platform in place of I think this is of Mural or Miro for execution of exercises like templates or formats? Scott, do you want to try that one?
Yeah, there's Mural is the one I've probably worked more with. I used to use Mural back when it was Ideas Board, I think, and then it changed its name. But Mural has a lot of different templates and that you can set up. I would say isn't necessarily specific to PI planning, but when you're looking at through the templates, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I need. I need something that looks like a Kanban board and a backlog, and I need a way of prioritizing. Oh, that one will work, and here's a retrospective one, and so there's a lot of templates out there.
Yep. Okay, great. Thorsten?
Yes. That's right, and it's very easy to make snapshots of PowerPoint slides or photographs of physical sessions, like I showed from the roaming sheet, for example, and to work with this. If any participants are interested in our things, they can come in contact and we can send some. It's very easy.
Cool. Thanks, Thorsten. So another tool, any tools recommended for doing weighted shortest job first workshops? So this is, I guess, during the PI. So Thorsten, what do you guys do?
Yes, that's a quite interesting thing. I think the weighted shortest job first discussion is only a catalysator for discussion and not for the result. To get the result, Mentimeter or something is very easy, but you need the discussion before. And therefore you need a board to work on. And one of the boards we talked about could be the board. And to take the final results, we would choose Menti to get the results together.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah, same here. We use polling tools like Menti, or if we happen to be in Zoom, we'd use a Zoom poll just to help us with the, generally setting out the estimating, whether we're doing planning poker and sort of story pointing or doing it in some other form. We try to create that same experience just in a polling tool of some sort, and even in Microsoft Teams.
Okay, cool. So we're almost at time. So we're just going to take these last two questions. So this one is just curious which PI planning tool Scaled Agile is using for their own PI planning. So the tool we're going to use is Weave. We're using a bit of a combination. Weave is the main tool we're going to use for PI planning. It's going to give us our online capability while we're all distributed. If you've ever been to our office, we have a big physical PI, program board. And so the information that's entered in onto Weave will actually then be just transferred to the physical board. In parts of Scaled Agile, some of the teams are using Rally. My team uses Rally. So we do use that internally with the team and some of the other teams. And so I use that to help get a lot of things set up. So, I mean, it all depends on your company. There's lots of good tools out there, but the important thing is to make a company decision or make a train decision at least, and get a consistent tool across the train or across the solution train. It also may have to adapt into what your organization allows you to use. Okay, so last question. Nice to see a seamless collaboration across the continents, walking the talk. Great. Not sure I need to answer that, but thank you, Fabian. Okay, so I think we're at time, so I'll just do this one last question. So awesome session, thanks. That's just congrats. It's just a thing. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you in the session. So with that said, we'll pull the session to a close. Pranjal, do you have any last words?
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all three of you, Gerald, Thorsten, and Scott, and most importantly, all the attendees for taking time out. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or directly to Scaled Agile, and stay well, stay safe.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you guys. Thorsten and Scott, thank you so much for all your wisdom. We appreciate it. We'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.